Welcome, Sam, to Millionaire University. So excited to talk to you today. When we first got on the call, I honored you for your amazing bio, which we've probably talked about before jumping into this conversation. And it's always fun to have these amazing interviews with people who are just brilliant and existing in their genius zone. So thanks for coming on here and being willing to share that with us today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So give us a little background because I know you are what we might call a serial entrepreneur. You've started things, you've moved through different seasons of entrepreneurship. Have you always been an entrepreneur and you feel like you're in your sweet spot right now, or what's been kind of the up and coming story?
Yeah, I don't think I set out to be an entrepreneur, but my I launched my first startup, if you will, while I was in high school. Bought into like a DVD vending kiosk that was today 15 or 20 years ago in history, that I tried to move. And then when kind of internet marketing started becoming a thing, um, I didn't have a college degree or like a bunch of applied experience, but I built a site called hiremehubspot.com, and ran ads targeting their employees to register for the free webinar on why you should hire me, which is I didn't think I'd get the job, which was very liberating because if I had thought I would get the job, I would have applied and probably not gotten it. But because I was willing to do something else because I had no chance, was able to stand out and then spent quite a few years at HubSpot. Was head of growth at HubSpot Labs, led HubSpot Labs. Then after that, yeah, series of startups from there. And most recently joined Agent.ai, which is not part of HubSpot, but is founded by the same person who founded HubSpot.
Hmm.
So despite not having worked at HubSpot for 6 years now, I apparently can't seem to escape their gravitational pull.
Well, when you put that much effort into getting hired, I don't know what you expect to happen. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, it was fun. It was a small company at the time. I think there was like 150 or so employees, and most people hadn't heard of HubSpot. And it was a very unique time. Marketing was easier back then.
Mhm.
Now it's like it's game of millimeters because everything's been optimized out of its, to death. Back then it was, oh, congratulations, you have a blog. You are number one on Google. Good job at SEO.
It's so true. Like the barrier of entry got lower, and so it's making the challenges a little bit different, where we have to be so much more, like you said, the millimeter approach. It's very fine-tuned compared to before. You could have a heartbeat and have a website address, and you're probably going to get some leads somewhere, somehow, and not even know why, and you didn't need to know why. Compared to now, where I was just telling you when we first jumped on, when I first looked at the website for Agent.ai, I was like, oh my gosh, nothing makes me feel more behind than when I see how fast things are moving and the progression of technology combined with online marketing and business. And I think sometimes it can feel a little bit like we're going to fall behind if we don't stay on top of it. And part of that, and something that you even mentioned, because we have to be so much more dialed into these tiny little micro things, there's a sense of we have to let go of some of the tasks because we just don't have time because it is moving so quickly. So tell us a little bit about what Agent AI is because we're all a little familiar, ChatGPT, what artificial intelligence is. What's the difference and what's kind of the thing that Agent AI does?
Yeah. So first of all, for what it's worth, this pace of change is insane. Even as somebody who like studies change professionally, it's really really hard to keep up with. I mean, we're 2 years into like ChatGPT's demo kind of app that they launched, and
Yeah.
Agent.ai. The goal there is to make it so that there's a single marketplace and network for people to find and use AI agents. So there's thousands and thousands of people building AI agents. One of them is probably the one you want to use, but it's really hard to know like which one that is, feed it the appropriate information, etc. So that's one half of it is can we build the first professional network, so LinkedIn, if you will, for AI agents, if you're going to hire AI agent coworkers. The other aspect is can we make it so that you can build your own? So it's kind of very similar to the original HubSpot thesis, like the
Mhm.
content management system, building a website, et cetera. Instead of needing engineers and developers and stuff to build a website, HubSpot's idea was like, can we make it simple for everyday companies and marketers to use powerful tools? Agent.ai is very similar. So in January, we're launching the beta or the builder. So you can build your own AI agent.
Mm.
You don't have to know how to code. You don't have to know anything other than just be able to think logically about how you want things to work. And you can build AI agents that do stuff that's useful at work, but also somebody built one in the beta program that's like a Dungeons and Dragons thing, which is cool. I built one that's a chess coach. I have another one that just like looks at my calendar every day, fetches
Mm.
information about who I'm meeting with, and generates an audio overview for my morning walk. So some of it, like, it's not all life changing stuff, but in that kind of game of millimeters, it changes your life slowly. So that's the idea
Mhm.
behind Agent.ai is can we make it easy for people to build their own, AIs, customize AIs that already exist, and then discover and use AIs as we like build these coworker teams of AI agents.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm talking my level of understanding was I don't even know what an AI agent is. And so you did a good job, I think, of just explaining that without having to go more into depth. But it's essentially taking maybe this task, because I remember when ChatGPT came out and being like, why is everybody talking about all these different ways we're going to be able to use it? You just get on there and you type stuff, right? And now that time has passed and I'm catching up to the vision, I'm saying when you connect AI with these other platforms, with these other ideas and these needs that you have, that's actually the real power. It's ChatGPT is cool, some of these other little AI things, but when you see it integrated within things you're using on a day by day basis, that's what we're talking about, right? We're creating an agent that's an artificial intelligence version of maybe an employee or something to go and complete that task. And there's this a marketplace with all everything you can imagine. Even just right now in the beta phase, there's so many different things that I went on there. I was like, what? Somebody's already created this because they needed it for their own business, and now I can just snag that tool and use it.
Yeah, it's the downside to us letting researchers and engineers name things. Agent isn't a particularly descriptive name. It's called that because it can take autonomous actions. So it
Mm,
can do things on your behalf. So it has like agency, if you will.
mm,
Not from the philosophical sense, but from the kind of literal sense.
yeah.
So, ChatGPT was an interesting demo of what's called transformers, which is just language and context. Can you have a model that understands language? To explain that, I always way back in the day, I did a project that for the space shuttle, and I was working with some folks from Germany, and I tried to be cool. And this is early 2000s. I tried to be cool and translate our stuff into German, and I used the German word. I was trying to say server, like computer server, and I used the German word for waiter. Um, that did not go over well. I did not improve my credibility in their eyes.
Mm,
But because the translation system didn't have context, it couldn't understand like what words should be used there. So context is the kind of thing that's made AI actually useful,
mhm,
and then being able to interact with it in a natural way. So it's quite shocking to me actually. Like before we started talking, I was telling you, like local pub that I know is using ChatGPT to feed in like here's what we're trying to get rid of and turn over faster, and it's creating recipes for them, giving it names. And so this pub that like needs me to update their website so people can scan their QR code and download their menu is doing like Amazon level inventory logistics optimization because
wow.
the conversational interface seems so natural. Right? I think that's
Mhm.
what blew people's mind was that not that the amount of information it could process, all this stuff that doesn't actually matter to users, but that it was intuitive to interact with.
Yeah. I mean, you look at that from a marketing perspective, and that is why it works. We're able to put in our direct problem, pain point, symptom, and we're given the solution. Whereas if you're in computer programming or you're doing more of the analytical things, building a website, you don't even know what you don't know, and you're having to like figure out even the right question to ask. And so I think you bring up a really powerful point that context is the power behind AI being really, really effective. And you guys say, I think somewhere on your website, and it's kind of part of the messaging, is that we really do need that context. Like we need humans still. And maybe I got this backwards actually. It was like we need the AI so we can keep doing the human things, but it goes both ways, right? We need human creation paired with AI to really make it effective. So it's not just this thing sitting there where we have no idea how to use it. And I think having things like this where there's people who've already created it can expand what we even realize is possible using AI because I have to be reminded I'm using it every single day in my business with writing sales copy and helping me figure out my marketing message. And yet it's like other friends who are not in the business world are telling me, I said, what's a good workout plan? Like, what's a good website? And she said, just go in ChatGPT and tell it what you want, and it'll give you exactly what you need, and you can Google the rest. So I think it's pretty insane what we're starting to dial into because of that interface and that conversational thing, like you said.
Yeah, I like explaining AI to people. AI is really good at being average at things. So it's never going
Hmm.
to be as good at coding as an elite computer science engineer. It's never going to be as good at art as a great artist or as good at writing as a great writer. But it gives us capabilities that we wouldn't otherwise have.
Hmm.
So I can design graphics or I can, write my own applications without having to like bother. Haven't written code in over a decade. Not that anyone's used. But I can, create my chess coaching app without having to bother, the engineering teams or my friends who can code. So it gives us skills. It gives us like everybody's kind of T-shaped now, right? So we've got the thing that we're really, really good at that we specialize in, but then we also have, you know, sales reps can be data analysts and marketers can, write JavaScript, and not at a great level, but at a very mediocre level, just because that's how AI works. It watches
Yeah.
millions of people do things millions of times, and then it can kind of like do it just as well as the average person can.
Hmm.
So that's to me, it's kind of that force multiplier angle where you now as an individual have access to far more skills and capabilities than you ever had before without having to learn all those things. You don't have
Yeah.
to learn how to be a mediocre artist. AI can be a mediocre artist for you.
Hmm. And so let's talk about that because when we're able to remove some of those things that we might have had to hire out, it's financially going to help us a little bit to advance things quicker. It's giving us that time freedom. So, what are some other ways that we can really leverage this in terms of building a business? Because this is what our audience is, right? We're out there, we're in the beginning, middle stages, maybe even scaling a business. You just mentioned a couple of them. Do you have any other thoughts that come to mind when we think about how can we tap into this and where are we maybe not utilizing AI to its fullest capacity so that we can actually grow because we need those micro changes, right? To be able to actually stand out.
Yeah. So everybody keeps saying that the next billion-dollar unicorn is going to be three people using AI. I don't know if that's the case, but it definitely lowers the barrier to entry for small businesses and startups because you don't have to raise a ton of money in order to hire a full team that can do everything. You can do the
Hmm.
one thing that you're good at, and then you can have the AI write copy for you and things like that. So it's definitely reduced the barriers to entry, um, which I think is going to be fascinating when instead of like hundreds or thousands of companies competing with Google, there are millions of companies competing with Google. Like it's going to level the playing field in interesting ways. My favorite way to use it actually though is learning. So one, you can get it to adopt a perspective. So tell it, you are the type of persona that you're talking to or that you want to sell to. And then have it react to the things that you're trying to say, help you refine your positioning, your website copy, things like that.
Hmm.
It will occasionally hallucinate things. So it invents things that it thinks sound right because it doesn't actually have a basis in fact. I actually think it's a feature, not a bug, because if AI hallucinates something that your customers theoretically would like, maybe you should build that and sell that to them.
Hmm.
But then also it's just patient, right? So I one morning I couldn't sleep and I spent 4 hours chatting with ChatGPT, learning about some weird quantum physics thing, and no human teacher would have possibly had that level of patience with me. But it just sat there, and eventually it's like, oh, I see where you're going wrong. I see why you don't understand this, why you're not getting this, and it was able to explain things to me. So really helping you learn topics that you may not be able to understand
Hmm.
in another way. That's my favorite way to use it. So it kind of
Yeah.
gives us a teacher, an assistant, and also a mirror, if you will, without having that myopic sense of here's what you know we want to build. It can adopt a perspective that somebody else has, which I think is
Hmm.
particularly interesting for entrepreneurs because the entrepreneurial mindset is not the same as everybody else's mindset. And where I see a lot of entrepreneurs go wrong is they build stuff that they find interesting,
Hmm.
and they don't have that mirror kind of the customer without spending a bunch of money on either market research or worse, spending a lot of money and time building a product that nobody actually wants.
Hmm. So before I forget, I want to address this because I know there's been fear a little bit around AI replacing jobs. We're seeing there are some definite downsides to certain jobs that we thought were going to be secure forever. Like people are starting the new profession, computer programming, things like that, and now it's like taking a dive. And going back to what we said before with context, I just want to address like there's a unique opportunity, and it's something you guys are facilitating with Agent.ai, and that is the ability to use it and leverage and have yet another thing that we can sell, bringing that humanity and that context back in. So, what are some of your thoughts with that? Where maybe we've gone through this like freak out phase of AI is going to take away all of our jobs into recognizing how we work harmoniously with it to actually create more income, more jobs, more opportunities.
Yeah, so a couple things. One, again, it's good at being mediocre at things, so it's not going to be as good as you and I. It also doesn't have experience, so like you and I don't
Hmm.
really have to worry about it replacing our jobs. What I worry about are the people who go into entry level jobs, because if you replace entry level sales reps, where do senior sales reps come from in the future? So the interesting thing that I see people doing, at least the you know, again, the entrepreneurial minded kind of folks, is using it to help learn, right? So can you use it to practice your sales pitch? Can you use it to like learn those skills and become a senior sales rep without having to spend a bunch of time, dialing and doing all the stuff that's usually required for us to kind of get that experience.
Hmm.
So I think for it to have a good impact on the universe, we have to do three things. One, the environmental impact, right? Like we're Dharmesh doesn't know this yet because I haven't sent him an email, but we're planting a bunch of trees to offset all of the carbon footprint that the AI usage through Agent.ai is creating. And then two, with the job displacement, we need to, one, help people learn, right? Have it be a practice mechanism. Interviewing is another good thing. People don't interview very often in their life, but it's a really important task that they have to achieve. So can you practice interviewing with a company? Same concept for any professional skill. But then the other thing is, I think, how we design these things. So Andre, who's the engineering lead at Agent.ai, has a really interesting paper on how can we create the marketplace so that it rewards AI agents that increase capabilities and don't replace capabilities. There's no fundamental reason that AI has to
Hmm.
replace jobs. We're only doing that because the people with money to pay for AI, which is what Google and Microsoft and Salesforce and everybody else are focusing on, tend to go after those people. Which again, is kind of fits. Why is Agent.ai founded by the person who founded HubSpot? It's because like, can we democratize that access and make it so that it's not just large companies and organizations replacing their staff, but instead thousands and thousands, millions of tinier staffs being created so that people can do things on their own.
Yeah. Hmm. Super fascinating. And it's crazy how quickly this has progressed to where even a few years ago, this conversation would sound like a different language, right? Like, what are we doing? What are we talking about?
It's wild. There's a video of me on a stage probably like 4 years ago saying that we're like several Nobel Prizes away from
Hmm.
this. But yeah, the Google research team published the paper that all this is kind of based on back in 2019, 2022 or so. ChatGPT does just a demo app. Nobody expected it to be as popular as it was. And then now here we are kind of in the generative AI era. And it's again, just to reinforce everybody, I literally keep up with this for a living and it's hard for me to keep up with. So we should all feel overwhelmed. But as I was saying earlier, my favorite Game of Thrones quote, chaos is a ladder, right? Like the team at Google, like Google got sucker punched. That is mind boggling. They're so
Yeah.
far behind. Microsoft made some great moves. ChatGPT and OpenAI, like we're able to outcompete, you know, Google. And so if that can happen to Google, then whoever it is you're thinking is the 800-pound gorilla in your industry that you want to go compete with, probably not that tough in an era in
Hmm.
which you can, use AI to create kind of these exponential force multipliers for you.
Yeah. So can we talk about those? I love that term, force multipliers, and just maybe give some examples in the real world when you're building a business. And I think this works no matter what industry you're in. But what are some of the things that you can utilize these agents for? Like, I know I've gone and looked at them, but just to put this in perspective of application in daily life when you're building, what are some of the top ones that you're seeing used? Because I know there were some that stood out to me. I'm like, wait a minute, I spend so much time doing that. You're telling me I can just dial that in?
Yeah, the obvious application has been in sales because it's kind of like moderately repetitive, commoditized task that just has to be like customized to whoever you're talking to. And so those are the people who adopted first were people who are doing things like content creation for SEO, which is why SEO has been destroyed because now there's far more articles being created every day than there used to be. So it's so much
Hmm.
harder to stand out. And the same with sales. Like LinkedIn has become and email and everything else like that has just become. I don't even read the messages anymore uh, because I get so many now that are well written compared to 4 years ago. But now
Hmm.
everybody's kind of doing the same thing. So those were the kind of obvious applications. I think right now we face the blank canvas problem. Um, Much like the old CEO of IBM said that way back in the day, he's like, I think there's a market for like 5 or 6 computers globally, and then obviously they pivoted to be a computer manufacturer. We're in that same kind of scenario now, where not everybody quite understands exactly what you can do with AI. I'm not even really going to say I understand everything everybody's going to do, but it's able to create stuff. It's able to the writing, the design, data analytics. I'm particularly fascinated by its ability to help you like learn and help you adopt other perspectives. The That's what I'm really interested in. Like again, I keep coming back to that non-technical pub owner who used it for something I had never thought of, which is
Hmm.
inventory turnover optimization. So it's more a question of thinking about what problems you have, and then like don't worry about whether or not it's possible because the engineers will. Everything is becoming like possible at this point.
Hmm.
Uh, it's more a question of like, are you curious enough to try it? Because most people who try AI fall into one, two buckets right now. Either they try it, and because it's not a magical
Mind
C-3PO from Star
reader.
Wars, mind reader, they just drop it. They're like, this isn't for me, which is really silly given how fast things are changing. Or they adopt it and they don't expand beyond what anybody else is doing. So
Mm,
like sales reps love it. It's great for that company research, sales outreach emails, everything else like that. Marketers love it because it can't write a good article, but it can write an article that saves you 80% of the time.
hmm.
And then I think the entrepreneurs are going to like it because it can do a lot of the processes that you would normally have to hire somebody for. So you can be more competitive without having to spend quite as much money.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've definitely used it for a bunch of the things that you just mentioned. And I think even getting into the micro, where it's like, okay, yeah, I might use it to write sales copy, but when I was on there, it's like researching my competitors, showing me the pain points, building a persona, an audience member for me. If you're launching anything online, these are really, really valuable. And it's yet another time saver to use the agent, right? Because I can sit there and I can kind of fumble through a conversation with Claude or ChatGPT, or I can go to somebody who's already had this conversation. And it's the same reason some of these videos that do really well on Instagram or TikTok, where they're giving you the prompt. This is essentially not just giving you the prompt, but the entire format and everything just already built for you so that you're able to generate the same outcome that you might, because even then there's time, right?
Yeah.
I can sit down and talk to ChatGPT for 2 hours, or I can plug in an agent that's already had this conversation, apply it to my own industry, and here we go. I've now just saved even more time.
Yeah, I will say the one prediction I feel confident making, because I don't feel that confident in too many predictions these days. Prompt engineering is not that is a bug, not a feature. Like the fact that you have to sit there and think through like how am I going to say this and everything else. When you're interacting with a person, we don't have to do that. I didn't
Hmm.
sit down and think about how I was going to say things before we hopped on this call.
Yeah.
Um, and that will eventually change. That's going to get much, much better. So for people who are taking prompt engineering jobs, I think that's kind of like a short term thing. So you should be leveraging that into other career growth. But yeah, like having to sit down and think about how do I say something so that, you know, think methodically and give me a step by step explanation and all these like little tricks that they have, you get so much more out of it. Like there was some research that AI is much more effective when you're nice to it,
Mm.
because it turns out that a lot of the professional content that it was trained on, people generally don't swear at and insult each other like they do maybe on Reddit or Twitter or whatever, some of the other stuff that it's trained on. So when you act professional and nice, it tends to feed from some of that content that it was trained on that's more
Mm.
professional and nice. So some of those nuances, I think, are the really interesting tidbits to share. And then the big question is, do you actually share that information or just use it for yourself? So I love
Yeah.
that people are sharing it,
Yeah.
as opposed to 20 years ago with SEO, every time you came up with a trick, you didn't tell people about it, right?
Hmm.
You just
Yeah.
used it for yourself.
It's true. And now I feel like it's the quickest one to put in the right question or the prompt, and it's I don't know. We're all going to move so much quicker, and it's not really actually saving us a whole lot to keep it to ourselves because somebody will figure it out. They're just two prompts away from being caught up to where you are right now, right?
That is a great one-liner. Yes, your competitors are two prompts away from catching up to where you are now. So that
Yeah.
is not your competitive advantage.
It's so true. It's so true. So, how can we have more of that competitive advantage? We're utilizing this, we're able to tap into these little features and move our businesses further down the line. What are some other ways we can maximize some of our efficiency with using tools like this?
And so the fact that people are using them at all, you'd be quite surprised the number, like how far ahead that puts you. It's kind of like again back in the day where you just had a website that
Hmm.
was a competitive advantage. I remember having to explain to people what search engines were before we could sell them SEO software back in the day. And so just by the nature of the fact that you're out there, you're ahead. There aren't really second mover advantages, right? So like, MySpace and Facebook beat Friendster and some of those things, even though they weren't first.
Hmm.
Now AI is moving so fast that like first mover advantage is a very, very real thing. So I think, the fact that people are using it, the fact that you're keeping an eye out too for all the new tools that come around. Like the pace of change and updates is insane. You should create an AI agent that just reads all of your industry newsletters, reads all the AI technology
Mm.
newsletters, and then reinterprets it for you from that perspective. Because Google yesterday rolled out new models of Gemini that can start to use tools for you. This is what I'm really excited about. Is AI that can start to use tools for you, because I don't
Mm.
actually want to send the email. I don't want to add things to my calendar. Like it's why we love talking to Google Home or Alexa or whatever it is. You can have that kind of. I don't want to type. I don't want to use tools. I want tools to be used for me.
Hmm.
Um, so that's the bit that I find really interesting, and the bit that people just really don't want to wait because there's definitely not going to be a participation ribbon for coming in second or third in your industry. AI is just creating like very, very, you know, competitive advantages that people want to kind of jump on early and take advantage of. So
Hmm.
don't get discouraged. Don't expect it to be magic. It's not magic, right? It's
Hmm.
one of, first of all, it's just math. That's all it is. We haven't invented anything new. There's no emergent properties. It's not conscious, despite the arguments that people make. But it's how you use it and what you ask it to do, and how, you know, creative you can be. Like the idea of, I love to tell AI, don't worry about what's possible. Like just pretend the laws of physics don't exist and the laws of math don't exist, the laws of economics don't exist. Now let's have a conversation about a problem or a market segment or something like that. And sometimes it will invent insane things that I can't actually build, but
Hmm.
sometimes it invents things that are pretty interesting, or it
Yeah.
teaches me things I didn't think to look at. You know,
Hmm.
I love it as a learning aid for things I'm trying to learn, but I also love it when it tells me things that I hadn't really thought to look up, or I hadn't thought that it's something that the prospects or the customers would be confused about.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of like the overarching thing there, and just be very cognizant of, as you're building your team, as you're building your company, what are all the tools that you need to use. A lot of those companies have AI tools, and if they don't, platforms like Agent.ai, kind of the whole point is you'll be able to make AI agents that can, you know, go read The Economist and then go check your Google Analytics and tell you the Fed decreased, you know, interest rates, and here's what that means for your PPC campaigns. Like that kind of context mixing, I think is what's really interesting.
Yeah, my mind is like reeling right now, and I'm gonna be listening back to this interview multiple times because, again, like we're on a whole other level. And so I was gonna ask you something too, in terms of with Agent AI, and I know even without it, where do we begin to create these agents? Like, how do we? And I think you mentioned like we need to know the right questions to ask. We need to think creatively about what our individual needs are. But let's say I have that and I want to replicate that for somebody. I've created something really cool. I've had this conversation with generative AI. Where do I even start with now creating something that connects with other apps or platforms? Or do I have to create my own platforms and apps? These are like the base level questions I know a lot of people, including myself, have. Where do we even start to do that?
Yeah, so to be fair, there are a bunch of other companies that are building AI studios or AI agent builders. We're just the only one that's giving it away for free
Mm,
because we didn't raise, you know, $20 million to try and sell you a $99 a month subscription to an AI agent studio. So you can go use some of the other ones that actually have more power and functionality, one probably than you need, but definitely more
mhm,
than we're going to have at Agent.ai. Agent.ai is free to build, it's free to use, because we know that performance is going to go up and costs are going to go down. So like our bill is pretty high right now to run all the AIs for free. But we also know that like to democratize access to it, to make it accessible from a technical perspective, understand it, understand how to use it, everything else like that, and from a financial perspective, so you're not spending thousands of dollars a month on a bunch of tools that you might not need or might not be able to understand or use fully. So there are other more powerful alternatives, but Agent.ai is a good place to start because you can also see what everybody else has done. Like I
mm,
remember the early days of the app marketplace. There were forums for like Android developers, and you could post in there just ideas that you had, and developers had nothing else to do, so they would go in and build your ideas. Like that's where we're at right now.
mm,
So it's we have a community at Agent.ai, so you can just go ask questions, you can share ideas, share things you wish somebody would build, because a lot of times you get to like 90% of what you want to build, but there's just like a slight difference. Like I can't connect to the chess.com API, and that's not a pre-written connector anywhere. And so like the community aspect for it, I think has been really interesting. So don't want to sound like I'm just promoting Agent.ai. We are very free, which is, you know, its own value proposition.
mhm.
The goal is to be easy to use. The goal is to democratize it. You don't have to be an enterprise to have access to the power of AI agents. But there are also other platforms out there that people can explore.
Okay, so basically you're saying come there and just poke around a little bit and play around and see what's possible. We're coming on with a very like handheld guided version of creating our own agent.
Yeah, or take an agent somebody else has made and
Hmm.
customize it for yourself, right? So there's the
Cool.
company research agent, but maybe if you're a financial services company, it doesn't really give you, you know, the information from a company's S2 filing or something like that, right? So you need to take something somebody else has built and customize it for your own use cases.
Yeah.
That is what I think is really fascinating. Like the number of agents that are pretty similar to each other that people are building, but they're just different enough that it makes it actually useful for that person in
Hmm.
that context, versus me trying to create a startup and then sell like my normalized version to a bunch of people. You can now
Hmm.
just create like the one that's perfect for you. I find that fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, so you've mentioned this a couple times. I want to pivot just a little bit because I know you have a background in startups. So just giving our listeners, who are very many of them are in that position, I don't want to be so broad to say like, what are your top three tips for a startup? But let's just dive a little bit into that, especially maybe even combining these two topics of utilizing AI and what is it looking like right now? We're in coming into 2025. What would you do differently, or what have you guys been doing? I know you mentioned the pricing and understanding that in the future that's going to change. What are some tips and advice that you have for people who are in the same stage, starting a new company?
I mean, one, understand that things have changed. So whatever your venture capitalist investors are telling you, they're probably wrong.
Mm,
Most of them probably don't remember the Great Recession and what things were like when capital used to actually cost money, like it is starting to do again now.
yeah.
They also don't remember how insane and crazy things were in the mobile app era, and when mobile devices streaming video, all these things really became a thing. Like podcasts died for a while. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but
I
nobody
did.
listened to podcasts for like a period of
Yep.
10 years. And then they came back because of the mobile experience, because of video, because of streaming speeds and the ability to interact and have that kind of community. So definitely don't take everything that investors tell you is true at face value. You're more likely right than they are, which was not the case half a decade ago.
Hmm.
And then also, you can be more ambitious. Like my last startup, OneScreen AI, we raised $10 million. We had a team of 60 plus people, and I had to raise that much money and hire that many people because I didn't have the time, nor frankly the skill set, to do like a cash flow forecast, right?
Hmm.
So I had to hire like somebody with an MBA and like come do a cash flow forecast for me, and then probability adjusted cash flow, all this like weird stuff that I wasn't really qualified to do. And now you can use AI to help you do things that you don't need to go and try. It's not a blocker, you know. Having the skill set or having the money to go build that kind of team shouldn't be a blocker for you. Conversely, you should kill ideas faster. So because it was so time intensive and you put so much of your reputation on the line when you were fundraising and launching a startup back in the day, uh, you probably stuck things out longer than you should have. Um, I have a whole article on like horrible failures that aren't on my resume, of all the terrible ideas that I've had. Um, and in the era of AI, the ability to hit the reset button and try something new if it's not working or not working as much as you want, I think is a mental shift that everybody who's launching a startup has to have. So be more willing. This is a weird thing to say. Be more willing to give up, because the ability to pivot and go try something new and the probability of you being successful is much much higher now, because the barriers to entry to do all the things that you need to do are so much lower now, kind of than they used to be.
Wow, that is so true. And I hadn't really ever thought about that before. And I think that explains a little bit of what my workflow has looked like since AI and since utilizing some of these things. Because you look at the time that you spend trying to problem solve in your business and trying to make it work because you have made those commitments and it was so much grind. And it's that sunk cost principle, right, that we adhere to. And when you have the AI, when you have these tools available to you, we can move through decision making so much quicker. And what I love about AI is it's not emotional. I love that it's, not real. And we can have those logical conversations with this entity that's helping us to see the writing on the wall a lot quicker than we used to. And so that's pretty good awareness and I think makes a lot of sense why my business and things that I'm doing have totally drastically sped up because I'm not living in that space of hem hawing about it a little bit longer than I used to when I didn't have the logical push in the right direction.
You bring up a really great point, by the way. I love that a lot of these AI companies and models are adding the ability to forget what you're saying to them, which doesn't really matter because it's not like an open AI researcher is sitting there reading through your transcripts being like, oh, like I wonder what Sam's up to today.
Hmm.
But it makes people feel more comfortable, the fact that I can have a temporary session, and I can ask the questions and say the things that I might be too embarrassed to say with my business partners, with my investors, with my customers. You can be kind of vulnerable with AI in a way that is hard with an actual human being, because it's
Hmm.
not a person. It can't judge you. I mean, it can. act like it's judging you. In fact, you can tell it to act like it's judging you, but
Hmm.
there's no personality or soul there that's that you actually have to worry about what it's going to think about you. So it is more of a help people feel comfortable with AI kind of nuance. But if that does make you feel comfortable, like turn on temporary mode in Claude or GPT or Gemini, whatever it is you're using, and yeah, ask it all the stupid questions you've always been afraid to let people know. Like random story, we were fundraising at the last thing. My head of finance was googling how to calculate free cash flow, and didn't realize he was sharing his screen with the VCs we were pitching. Like that's you know, but we all have those questions, right?
Hmm.
It was in that specific context, and being able to say when you don't know something to somebody who's going to help you understand the answer, the AI, and who's not going to judge you. Like I don't have to impress the AI. I do not care what AI thinks of me because I can always just tell AI like now you think something different of me,
Hmm.
which I can't do with a person. So I really like the fact that you can be vulnerable with AI to a degree that at least it's hard. So at least it's hard for me to
Hmm.
be vulnerable with other people,
Yeah,
actual humans.
right. Yeah. Okay. Well, if do you have anything else to add in terms of the startup? I think you gave us some really good food for thought and understanding how to use it and how to leverage some of these tools to get out of our own heads and get out of our own way and really move the needle forward more. Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, the one thing I would add is that customer acquisition is much harder than it used to be. One, because you can't have really long payback periods on customer acquisition in a world in which money actually costs something and it's not just 0% free money for everybody.
Hmm.
But then two, because now blogging, at least for SEO, is very commoditized. Outbound sales emails are commoditized. Video production, some of these things, at least at a basic level, are becoming commoditized. As you're thinking about building a company, building a startup, keep that in mind. Because just because somebody's been successful, there was always like the I'm going to build the Uber for X, right? Like just taking a business model and cloning it into a different industry was a thing for a long time. But just because somebody's been successful with something 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever, does not mean that same thing's going to work nowadays when it's really hard to go acquire customers from a
Hmm.
cash perspective and from standing out through the noise. So think about go to market far more than you used to when deciding if you're going to launch a startup and how you're going to launch a startup and how you're going to grow. Um, because you can't just, yeah, you can't just have a blog and tweet and do some A/B testing on your landing page. All the stuff that used to be great competitive advantages. One, everybody's been optimizing that stuff. Two, costs are higher, and then three, you don't need to hire a blogging team. Like we had six, you know, the marketing team at HubSpot when I joined was like 9 people. I think 6 people were doing content at the time, and now you need 0 people, which means you have to think about how to stand out. So be far more worried about go to market than you have been in the past.
Yeah. This, I've seen the same thing happen. I had a friend looking at researching for social media what to share for her small business, and she went to an account that's been around for 10 plus years, and she was like, "Well, they're doing it this way." And I said they can because they were doing it for a lot longer and they built that foundational piece. And then I even said, but they won't be able to keep doing it for much longer if they want to stay competitive and they want to acquire new clients because there really is a science and there does have to be a different level of awareness and bringing in creativity and like you said like bringing it to market and connecting with the market more so than building all the little tools on the back end. We have to do that or else we're going to fall behind. So I think at the end of the day, pairing all of the things, the resources we have available to us, the technology that can help us advance things quicker, giving us the advantage to show up as humans and market and connect. That's the whole goal, right? It's we're not doing this so that we can stay behind the scenes and not actually build anything meaningful. It's so that we can show up and be more meaningful and impactful, human to human. So if you use it
Yeah,
that way, I feel like then we eliminate a lot of those fears and reservations about using it.
you make a really great point, by the way, which is a lot of people see AI as being very inauthentic
Hmm.
because you can use it to generate stuff that you didn't have to put much effort into, you didn't have to put any thought into. But you can also use it to help you be more authentic. So I have, some friends who have some, learning disabilities or just communications disorders, and I asked one of them the other day, just because I've interacted with AI so much that unless you specifically tell it to adopt a voice, I can very often tell. I'm like, are you using AI to write your text messages to me? And he said, yeah, I am. He's like, I'm having AI help me communicate better with people by having it, hear my weird ideas and everything that's going on in my head. And here's how I say things, and then having it synthesize it. So there's going to be the people who use AI to be even weirder and more inauthentic at scale. And we see a lot of that LinkedIn, and everything's very, very full of that right now. But I think the winner, because that's so easy to do, and whatever's easy is going to be commoditized, which means it's not an advantage. The winners are going to be the people who are like, okay, how can I use this to actually be more human, communicate better, think about a perspective that's hard for me to think about. I really want to build an AI agent that lets me create a synthetic audience, not
Mm,
because I want to. Uh, I want to make the experience better, whether it's a podcast or a keynote speech I'm giving or something else like that. I want to be able to communicate to that audience as effectively as possible, and that's like the AI reflecting at you. That's what it can do. So you can use it to be inauthentic at scale, but you
mhm.
can also use it to be more authentic in ways that haven't previously been feasible.
It's so true. I've seen people use this to communicate with ex-spouses, with different authority figures, and it's absolutely true. And as long as you're bringing the humanity back into it and not copy pasting, it can be really, really helpful with so many different components of our lives. It's actually just beyond comprehension. So, Sam, you're amazing, and I love hearing a little bit more behind the scenes of what you've created and what you're working on, and how we can integrate a lot of these tools into our businesses, whatever stage we're in, seeing the accessibility of it, understanding a little bit more. It's been so helpful to hear you give us the scoop.
Yep. Try it. Don't wait. This isn't digital transformation where you got to go 20 years without trying to adopt
Mm,
CRM systems and stuff like that. You have like people talk about the industrial revolution. That took a century. It didn't happen everywhere at once, right? The digital transformation took decades, happened kind of everywhere at once, but not really. This is going to take like 20 months, and it's a huge opportunity
mhm.
because, again, like if Google can get sucker punched by a nonprofit research lab, anything's possible.
Yeah. Mm. So true, which means we're in the best era of opportunity ever, right? You can get very easily left behind, but you also can make super huge things happen. And in a time when things feel really unsure and there's a lot of jobs and changes to our economy and a lot of crazy stuff happening, to find the way that you can leverage those things and leverage what's available to you in a way that's never been possible, don't wait on it. I love that.
You can take the risks, and again, to reiterate, the downsides and consequences are just lower than they used to be.
Hmm.
Right? Like you can pivot from a failure so much more easily now, which rewards boldness, and it rewards people who are willing to go try and do things. And it's so hard to do that when you're a big company. When you're
Yeah.
established in what you're doing, like it's the whole innovator's dilemma thing. It's really really hard to change direction. So if you've wanted the HubSpot CMO had a great quote on his podcast where he said, "It's never been more profitable to be curious."
Mm.
Uh, that is so true because you'll find out things and you'll create these advantages before everybody else does. So, but conversely, if you don't do that and you're just sitting at number one, number two in your industry, that's not going to last long.
Yeah. Mm. So true. Good advice. Thanks again, Sam. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for coming on and sharing all of your genius with us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.